Well, welcome to Good Vibrations, a Beach Boys program. I'm Ron Vaccaro, joined by David Beard. Thrilled to be here. If you would have told me that someone who works their day job in television at NBC Sports and fantasizes about, always being in a Beach Boys universe, could be sitting here talking all things Beach Boys with you and with the editor-in-chief of Endless Summer Quarterly, and really one of the great Beach Boys historians of all time, David Beard, to steal from John Stamos. If you would have told me that, I would have told you no way, probably as recently as 2 months ago. Thrilled to be here for as long as you'll have us.
Yes, Ron, and I couldn't be more pleased myself to have you on board because I've been kind of wanting to just kind of find someone who will sit and shoot the shit about the Beach Boys and talk about the Beach Boys and get into the Beach Boys and share that love and passion of their history and their background as someone as much as I love them. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
The conceit for this is I loved it from the second you texted it to me a little while back. And it's really, we're going to start as a launching point, talking through some of the recent issues of Endless Summer Quarterly. And, you would think, okay, there's a great unifying thing to really be singular messaged, and maybe to an extent, but not really. I mean, there is so much variety of things you never would have thought about and connections that are made. You realize how small some of the musical historic connections are from back in the day, and then right up to present activities and just a flurry of activity, some prominent, some well-known, others not. Fascinating nonetheless. We really have something for everyone, and hopefully quite a lot to get to.
Yeah. Well, let's dig in.
Okay, I think we have to start with not the most recent issue, but the one just before that, the one that is the summer 2024 edition. For those of you following along at home, it's the famous, the story, and really some of the things that are in there. It really comes down to the documentary and the book are kind of the big talking points of that issue, and there's a lot of coloring in the gaps that you do as well. But I want to start big picture, just the documentary, and I'm sure you've had countless conversations about that, and I've heard a lot of people 20 years younger than me. I'm 42. 20 years, 30 years older than me have all experienced it, and I hear some things that are similar. The biggest thing I hear from a lot of people is, wow, I never realized that when you put it all together, that's how it started, which I think it's a great origin story.
It is, and I experienced some of that to a degree too, because when it came out, I was excited to be associated with having helped work on it, and that's before I even got the opportunity to watch the preview before it debuted on Disney Plus. And when I watched it, the couple things that struck me that were a little bit of a letdown for me personally as a fan, as a longtime fan, and that was there was a lot of footage of the Good Vibrations promotional film used throughout, which I didn't mind. But then there was moments where we just had stock footage of like a tractor in a cornfield, gentlemen wearing suits in a boardroom that weren't really the people that they meant in the boardroom. They were talking about a board meeting, but it didn't really, it was just like stock footage. And so I thought, as much as I went back and forth with White Horse Productions, who are the company that put the film together, I really thought that this documentary was going to be something, not necessarily where I saw a bunch of unused footage, but something that was going to be really unique and really different than anything else I'd seen before. Whether it ended up being 2 hours or episodic, which was my wish in the back of my mind. But so when it came out, I wasn't displeased with it, but I thought there was such a great opportunity to do something more. And when I talked with Frank Marshall and then sent him follow-up questions and got my interview in that issue that you showed, I thought it was lovely. He had a really special relationship with Jimmy Buffett, and they had cheeseburgers together down at Paradise Cove. So he had a very personal connection and relationship with Jimmy, and has a special memory of that location. But Jimmy Buffett, and God bless him, I love his music, is not the Beach Boys. So I thought it was lovely that he dedicated the documentary to him. But again, I think we really missed. I think Frank missed a great, and his wife, who's Kathleen Kennedy, who runs Disney. I think the two of them, as a couple, really missed an opportunity here to do something. Because if you have Disney Plus, you can watch the Beatles' Let It Be film, or you can watch or you can watch Peter Jackson's, I think it's 6 episodes, Get Back, which is this long drawn out Beatles looking at each other with music interspersed. And when you look at that, you just say, this isn't all that exciting, but it's such a historic and important glimpse into the Beatles' background and that part in their life. That's what was significant to me, and that's where I think, and I don't think they're going to do it, but I would, in the back of my mind, I'm still hopeful that maybe they'll go back to this and break it up into a 6-part episodic thing, because the Beach Boys history deserves that. I'm not, like you, I read a lot of comments about it, have heard a lot of feedback, and the longtime fans like myself, or even younger fans who come on in the recent generations, they're all very kind of taken aback by this and feel like this was, like the ball was really dropped. I don't know that I feel that, because for the people that I told about it and watched it and are aware of the Beach Boys, because who's not aware of the Beach Boys, watched it and came back to me and said, wow, there's so much there that I just had no idea about. So to me, on the one hand, the documentary really did what it was supposed to do. It illustrated who this great group is and explained a lot about them. Again, on the other hand, there's so much more I wish were there. If you're going to make it one documentary, then it should have been 4 hours long. And if it's on a streaming channel, what difference does it make? Because you can always pause and come back to it later. But like the book, the Genesis Publications book, which I will get to in a minute, that stops around 1979, 1980. And this documentary kind of almost does the same thing, but even comes across as stopping earlier, around 76 or so. And it's as if they didn't have anything going on musically after that. And that's just not at all true. So while the documentary did serve the purpose of turning new people on, new brand generations, I mean, if you're on Disney Plus and the Beach Boys, and you're like a new family, and you got a new family going, and you're like a new couple, you're a married couple, you got kids, you're in your early 20s and your kids are watching this Disney Plus special with you, fantastic, because now you've got your 7th and 8th generation of Beach Boy fans, which is significant in its own right. But again, for like these people that I've turned on to it, I want to say, oh, but there's so much more. Hey, Kokomo wasn't mentioned, but at least in the documentary, I'll give them credit for this. And the documentary, as the credits are rolling, Kokomo comes on. So I will give them credit for managing to get a 1988 song into this thing when it just stopped all of a sudden. And then while we're on the documentary, I'm going to say something about the soundtrack. The soundtrack was an even bigger drop. They put in Steven Sanchez, and I've seen a few of Steven Sanchez's recordings, and he's really like a kickback artist, like just really has a great way of connecting to, like, if you watch any of his music videos, there's a little bit of Elvis, there's a little bit of Roy Orbison, there's a lot of nostalgic that goes into his music. And it's pretty cool. He's a really good artist. But putting Blue Bathing Suit or whatever it is into this soundtrack when it's not in the film at all, and not including Kokomo, was a miss. And again, so the soundtrack to me was just a complete miss, and not having a physical product. Not having a physical soundtrack to be sold in the marketplace was another drop to me. I'm hoping that the documentary will come out in Blu-ray or 4K, and that it will have a bunch of bonus content. That's my next level of hope here with Disney Plus, that they'll have at least enough emotional and mental, like hopefully Frank Marshall's enough of a fan that he'll get and understand the need for that type of thing in a release of that kind. But so I liked the documentary. I didn't love it. I love that it served its purpose to turning new people and new generations onto the Beach Boys.
A few follow-ups there, all of which I think will be, take us fun places. In the issue you wrote, kind of the documentary is kind of like a curated time capsule. It's not, I think that was your phrasing in one of the pieces. And I think that's so true. And it almost gets to a branding exercise of like, the documentary, the Beach Boys. It's almost like the sparser the title, the more comprehensive someone is led to believe it's going to be. But it's not meant to be the complete. It really is, so I think like if it had stated a mission statement as prominently as I think the reviews talk about what it does really well, I think, okay, then it's evaluated under that different lens, right? And then, I did like, because you pressed Mike with a few questions. I could tell original and follow-up when you were doing those interviews about, stuff that wasn't in there or maybe was glanced upon. And he said, look, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically goes, look, I like the fact that it was positive. We need positive, and that's a consistent theme for him. And I think that was interesting to see. I also liked how he said, look, the whole live part is yet to be told. And, I think that's another yes, for sure, because I think it really is, this is all enduring. This is still being, in some respects, the history is being written, and it's not an insignificant history. Of the, I will submit that anybody who goes to a concert in any of the varieties,
Right.
I'm not taking sides in this point I'm making, and I've gone to all of the varieties in the last decade, multiple times each. It's a life-changing experience just going one night. It's changing people's lives just going one night. So it's a history and an impact, I think, that is still being there. But you talk about the soundtrack and the ball being, maybe dropped a little bit. I think if there's one thing that's unifying all the factions, it would be that everyone is wanting more from the Paradise Cove reunion. I think when you see John Stamos and Al Jardine basically say the same exact thing, we want more from Paradise Cove, I think that would be, the first thing anyone wants on okay, can we get a few more drips released?
Well, I love the fact that Al was very vocal about that, sitting right next to Frank Marshall during the interview process. I thought that was fair of Al, and I thought what I discovered was they didn't even put a microphone on it, Brian. And when I learned that, I thought, well, okay, there you go. There's the justification. They didn't really, they probably didn't think the recording turned out. And if they even had mic'd Brian, what would he have sounded like? I mean, one of the hard realities that we have to deal with right now, as you point out, there is excitement if you get to go see a concert. Brian's done touring. And for those who don't know, he's been diagnosed with a form of dementia. He's now under conservatorship. And he's got a great support system around him, so we can be glad about that. But there, the cold hard reality is that we're all getting older, and I just think that it's so important to recognize the meaningful value just behind the fact that these guys are performing at all. And it is a life-changing thing. And just touching on like Mike's performances, a lot of people who go see Mike more than once, they enjoy the shows, but then they complain he does the same old thing. But what a lot of people don't understand.
I would argue that too, by the way.
Well, the reason Mike does that, because in his mind, he doesn't know who's in the audience, right? And he's thinking to himself, if there's a person in the audience who's never been to a Beach Boys concert before, and this is their only Beach Boys concert that they're going to see and experience, I want to give them everything that I can give them, even if it's exactly what I just did last night. Because in his mind, I don't know who's out there. I don't know how many times they're going to get to come see a Beach Boys show. So that's the way his mind works. But he does change the set list. He does try to do his due diligence in changing the set list, even by a song or flipping something or changing something up every night. And I know you've experienced
And
that.
you
So
get into that, and we'll talk about that in the next issue. You get into that a little bit, a little behind the scenes of that process. So
yeah, and Mike's been, and on the subject of documentary, Mike's been public with me anyways. I don't know if he's spoken about it elsewhere, but I think he has. But he's working on a documentary about from his perspective. So I'm kind of looking forward to that because obviously his perspective is going to be more about the performance element of it because he's never been a studio beast, right? He's been very, very vocal about that too. I mean, that was Brian's bag, that was Brian's wheelhouse, and Mike was more than happy to show up and do the work when it was required. But Mike came to life when he took the stage because he fed off the audience feeds off him. That's his wheelhouse.
I think that dichotomy is, I think that division of labor, that, okay, this is my role, this is like, that is a key to understanding many successful partnerships. It's like,
Yeah.
when people are trying to be in the same space, it's like, that's much harder to have that lasting quality than, okay, you know what, you've got different worlds. And obviously this is not without significant issues and frictions and all that stuff. But the reality is the work speaks for itself. And I think
That,
that.
absolutely. And and another thing about Mike is Mike has never taken credit for what Brian did.
Yeah,
Ever. He never. You can watch anything, anywhere, anytime, whether it's on YouTube or anywhere, or you're reading an interview. Mike is always the one to point out Brian's genius. You may not use that word, but he'll speak to Brian's strength and his arrangement skills, and what a great songwriter he is. And if you go back to the 2012 reunion tour, whenever they did a spot together, when they would sit together publicly to Tonight Show or whatever it was, Mike would point to Brian and say, "Hey, man, if not for this guy, I wouldn't even be sitting here." But I mean, I think the excitement that comes when you go to a Mike show and the success of those shows speaks to Brian Wilson. I've shared this story with people. I don't know if I shared it publicly before. I think I have. In November 2015, I went to a Brian show, and I was sitting in the catering room with Al Jardine. So it was November 2015. We were coming up on the anniversary of Pet Sounds, and I had said to Al, boy, it would just be so great if you guys, meaning all of the Beach Boys, could just do a show together, or 2 dates together where you just do Pet Sounds in its entirety as the Beach Boys. And unsolicited, Al said to the room, not just to me, but to the room, how did it go? I said that, and Al said, man, I would love for that to happen. And then he said to me something to the effect of, Brian wants him there. Brian wants Mike on stage. And I didn't ask that question. It came. And I just went, okay, wow, I just learned a lot right there. Without prepping Al to ask that question, without directing the conversation in that way, he just volunteered that. He said, Brian wants Mike on stage. And he said it to the room. And I just thought, that's interesting. Now, Brian wasn't in the room, but just about a good chunk of Brian's band were in there. And that told me something. That told me all I needed to know about how Brian feels about Mike.
yeah. And
that told me all I needed to know. And it wasn't that same show, but there was another show. It was after the 2012 reunion. I was sitting with Brian backstage, and I could feel Mike's presence. And it was really strange to me. It was surreal. Because Mike wasn't on the tour or anything like that, but I felt Mike's presence just being next to Brian. And then I remember I was in DC with Mike, and I told Mike about that because it was at the Kennedy Center. Mike was performing at the Kennedy Center, and I was there. But I didn't feel Brian's presence around Mike backstage. The second Mike took the stage, I felt Brian's presence. And I love that. I love that, because Brian's not one to talk really lovingly about anybody. Brian's a quiet guy. So to be able to feel that, and then to be conscious of that feeling so that when I was around Mike, I was like, am I going to feel it here when I'm around? And I didn't. But the second that Mike took the stage and started performing that music, Brian was on full display, and I'm just talking about it now gives me goosebumps because it just was so cool. It's so meaningful. And we shouldn't overlook those meaningful moments and the meaning, because you were just touching on that, the value of those cousins and really what they genuinely mean to one another.
And I had, as coincidence would have it, I had an opportunity to experience a small, meaningful moment myself relating to everything you were just talking about, because Mike's band was performing in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the day the documentary came out.
Oh
I
gosh.
had tickets to that show. I watched the documentary with my parents that afternoon. We went to the show, and it was one of those one set shows because Dave Mason was opening, and
Okay.
they do the opening video, of course, but then they did, like, in lieu of an intermission, they put, a snippet of the Disney Plus
Oh, okay.
documentary in, the middle of the set, and then Mike came out of it, talked very passionately about the meaning of his cousin Brian, the whole family, and then proceeded to dedicate, Warmth of the Sun to Brian, having seen the documentary. And Warmth of the Sun's been in the set list a lot recently, and he'll either tell the story of the day it was, the day they wrote it, and the
Hmm.
melancholy nature there, but it was just, it was really, um, you could tell it was impactful and not something that was, it was not performative art.
Right.
It was being
Yeah.
spoken genuinely, and I think it resonated with the audience, and just you got that, you want to talk about feeling presence. I think everyone might as well have assumed the presence was there.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So
Whether you're going to escape when you go to any concert or not, that is actually what's happening. You have time off from work, you have time off from your life. You're hopefully you're in the moment. Hopefully you're letting it wash over you. If something's going on in your life that's stressful or something, you may still be distracted, even though you're in front of a musical performance. But for the most part, I mean, I would like to think anyone who's able to go to any musical event is able to kind of disconnect from life and just let whatever's going on in front of them wash over them and be able to appreciate and enjoy it.
yeah, totally. You also talk about some of the, when you're taking something in. One of the things from the documentary that is in the issue, you've got some really tremendous diversity of firsthand accounts from people who are at the premiere.
Mm.
And the one from one of Brian's daughters, from the Carney photo of kind of Brian now watching Brian on screen, that she, it was just, it's one of those things. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep this page open for a few minutes and soak this in.
Uh, yeah, yeah, I know. It's just it's such a strong, poignant, contrasted image, isn't it?
It really
It's
is.
it, the head of Brian Wilson, 80s, looking at this huge screen of him when he's from like 1964 is just like this. All you can do is just wonder what is in the older Brian's mind as he looks upon his younger, incredibly artistic self. This guy who just literally changed. And for me, I kind of wonder, is it sinking in? Not okay. Does he enjoy the documentary? Great if he does. But is it sinking in that, or at what point did it sink in for him that he's this incredible architect, right? This guy who just literally, just because of what he was feeling and how he could convey it to his mind and then communicate it out to the Wrecking Crew or the other Beach Boy members and have it translated into this thing you put a needle on. I mean, Jesus, it's incredible. It's incredible. And if it weren't, it wouldn't be sustained to this day, and it is more than sustained to this day. So yeah, I kind of, just looking at that image, I love that image. That's why I had to include it. Yeah.
And I'm obviously not, I'm preaching to the converted here, because if you're watching this, hopefully you've read Endless Summer Quarterly, but if not and you discover it, you will love it. And one of the reasons I think people will, and that strikes me, is you you pick up so many details from, you do so many, whether it's in the news and the tidbit section, but there's probably 6 or 7 different items across the last 2 issues or more where someone is talking about Brian recently, whether it's that picture in the documentary, whether it's Bruce's comments about how he was backstage, whether it's other people talking about, whether it's about the 82nd birthday party and he's calling out songs to his band, which is playing multiple sets in his backyard. Like,
Yeah, and he requests "Be My Baby" for his daughter to sing. I mean, you're just yeah.
and the thread there, those aren't all in the same place. Those are in like 6 or 7 or 8 different items across these issues. But Mike talks at one point about, like, Brian still comes alive in the music, like the music, and Al, like the music therapy with Brian, like it is like this, the music, it's I'm going to make a terrible analogy. You could call me Sims already, but like, it's like Weekend at Bernie's, right? Like, you hear the music and all of a sudden life is vibrant as ever. It's like music. It's always been about the music. It's always been about the harmony. And I think we're seeing that it comes through loudly just in, the quotes, and the vitality is centered around music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when I interviewed Al for the summer edition, when we were talking about the documentary, but then I had follow-up calls with he and Mike just 30 minutes apart from one another. I interviewed Mike twice with follow-up questions, and then Al. Al really, I had no idea. I knew that Brian's band members were going over to Brian's on a weekly basis to spend time with him and just play music, but I didn't realize Al was going over there as frequently as he was. So when he told me he tries to go over there every Tuesday, I was just like, whoa, man, that just made me feel so good that they're just going over to spend time with Brian. And Mike's interview in the summer edition, when I asked Mike and said, well, are you looking to do another Beach Boys recording? And Mike's response was, right now with Brian's health the way that it is, I just want to spend time with him. There is no caveat of, oh, we've got to do another song. I just want to spend time with my cousin. And I just thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, it really kind of hit very, very real. You talk about the documentary and some of the behind the scenes stuff that I kind of geeked out over the episode. The Perry Cox interview is terrific, and the story of the surfboard. I mean, think about Symbols, that surfboard, and what that surfboard was, the life-size real ticket to for him that came to life in the pages of ESQ. I think was really just, you want to talk about an escape. You can get an escape just reading about that experience. And for the production day, yeah, you're there from like 9 to 5, and it ended up that they were there all day, and you got about barely 30 seconds actually made the final product. That is media industry 101, folks. If you're ever wondering, like, read the interview with Perry and you get a big glimpse into it.
That is so true. And the summer edition, I had to reformat 5 times. I had a complete edition done, and then the book came, and then the documentary came. I had to reformat it again. And then out of the blue, I didn't even know Perry was sending that. I get this article with photos, and my jaw just kind of dropped. I went, holy smokes. And Perry is a sweetheart. And you get that from his article. He writes it from this, I think, a really relatable place of being a fan that any one of us would have felt. So there's a real connectivity there from that aspect. But I love the fact of how, and he went with his brother. So that I loved also, that just speaks.
Caretakers of the surfboard.
Yes. Well, Wilson Brothers. So here was he with his brother. Again, I just love that familial essence of the article. And you're right. So I don't want to ruin the article for anybody if they haven't got the issue. I highly recommend the summer edition because it's as you say, a whole day of that final shoot that they did down at Paradise Cove. It's a whole day of it, explaining when they arrived, explaining who arrived next, who they came in contact with, when Brian finally arrived. I mean, it's a very interesting look at a really peel back behind the scenes look at how those things are done and how they come together.